Review of Educational Research March 2007, Volume 77, Number 1, pages 81 to 112 doi, 10.3102/0034654302984887. The Power of Feedback. John Hattie and Helen Timperley, University of Auckland. Feedback is one of the most powerful influences on learning and achievement, but this impact can be either positive or negative. Its power is frequently mentioned in articles about learning and teaching, but surprisingly few recent studies have systematically investigated its meaning. This article provides a conceptual analysis of feedback and reviews the evidence related to its impact on learning and achievement. This evidence shows that although feedback is among the major influences, the type of feedback and the way it is given can be differentially effective. A model of feedback is then proposed that identifies the particular properties and circumstances that make it effective, and some typically thorny issues are discussed, including the timing of feedback and the effects of positive and negative feedback. Finally, this analysis is used to suggest ways in which feedback can be used to enhance its effectiveness in classrooms. Keywords: feedback, assessment, student, and teacher learning. Although it is often mentioned in articles about learning and teaching, surprisingly few recent studies have systematically investigated the meaning of feedback in classrooms. In this article, we begin with a conceptual analysis of the meaning of feedback and a synthesis of the evidence related to the power of feedback to improve teaching and learning. We then propose a model of feedback that is used to identify the circumstances under which feedback has the greatest impact. Specifically, the research evidence related to the different types of feedback and their effectiveness in terms of promoting student learning are discussed, the different ways students deal with feedback are described, and the relationship between assessment and feedback is provided. Finally, the model, together with the evidence underpinning it, is used to show how feedback can be used to enhance classroom learning and teaching. The meaning of feedback. In this review, feedback is conceptualized as information provided by an agent, e.g., teacher, peer, book, parent, self, experience, regarding aspects of one's performance or understanding. A teacher or parent can provide corrective information, a peer can provide an alternative strategy, a book can provide information to clarify ideas, a parent can provide encouragement, and a learner can look up the answer to evaluate the correctness of a response. Feedback thus is a consequence of performance. 81. Hattie and Timperley. To assist in understanding the purpose, effects, and types of feedback, it is useful to consider a continuum of instruction and feedback. At one end of the continuum is a clear distinction between providing instruction and providing feedback. However, when feedback is combined with more a correctional review, the feedback and instruction become intertwined until the process itself takes on the forms of new instruction, rather than informing the student solely about correctness. Kulabi, 1977, p. 212. To take on this instructional purpose, feedback needs to provide information specifically relating to the task or process of learning that fills a gap between what is understood and what is aimed to be understood. Sadler, 1989, and it can do this in a number of different ways. These may be through effective processes, such as increased effort, motivation, or engagement. Alternatively, the gap may be reduced through a number of different cognitive processes, including restructuring understandings, confirming to students that they are correct or incorrect, indicating that more information is available or needed, pointing to directions students could pursue, and or indicating alternative strategies to understand particular information. Wynne and Butler, 1994, provided an excellent summary in their claim that feedback is information with which a learner can confirm, add to, overwrite, tune, or restructure information in memory, whether that information is domain knowledge, metacognitive knowledge, beliefs about self and tasks, or cognitive tactics and strategies. p. 5740. Feedback has no effect in a vacuum. To be powerful in its effect, there must be a learning context to which feedback is addressed. It is but part of the teaching process and is that which happens second after a student has responded to initial instruction when information is provided regarding some aspect, of the student's task performance. It is most powerful when it addresses faulty interpretations, not a total lack of understanding. Under the latter circumstance, it may even be threatening to a student, if the material studied is unfamiliar or abstruse. Providing feedback should have little effect on criterion performance, since there is no way to relate the new information to what is already known. Kulabi, 1977, p. 220. The focus of this article on feedback as information about the content and/or understanding of the constructions that students have made from the learning experience is not the same as a behaviorist input-output model. Contrary to the behaviorist's argument, Kulabi, 1977, demonstrated that feedback is not necessarily a reinforcer, because feedback can be accepted, modified, or rejected. Feedback by itself may not have the power to initiate further action. In addition, it is the case that feedback is not only given by teachers, students, peers, and so on, but can also be sought by students, peers, and so on, and detected by a learner without it being intentionally sought. The effectiveness of feedback. The first question to ask is, how effective is feedback? We answer this question by referring to the usual effects of schooling on student achievement and then comparing them with the evidence related to feedback. Hattie, 1999, reported a synthesis of over 500 meta-analyses, involving 450,000 effect sizes from 180,000 studies, representing approximately 20 to 30 million students, on various influences on student achievement. This analysis included more than 100 factors influencing educational achievement and covered various aspects of those typically 82. Table 1 Summary of effect sizes from 12 meta-analyses assessing the influences of feedback. Study context. Number of effects. Effect size. Skiba, Casey, and Center, 1985 to 1986, Lysakowski and Wahlberg, 1982, Wahlberg, 1982, Tenenbaum and Goldring, 1989, Rummel and Feenberg, 1988, Yini and Miller, 1983, Kluger and Denisai, 1996, Lhamatyo, Menkes, and Brinko, 1990, Moyne. 1986, Bangert Drowns, Kulik, and Morgan, 1991, Kulik and Kulik, 1988, Getzi, Langer, and Glass, 1985, Wilkinson, 1981, for special education students cues, corrective feedback cues, motivational influences and reinforcement cues, participation, reinforcement, feedback, and correctives. Extrinsic feedback rewards. Diagnostic feedback in science. Feedback from student ratings. Feedback from testing. Immediate versus delayed rewards and punishments. Teacher praise 35 1.24 54 1.13 19 0.81 15 0.74 45 0.60 49 0.52 470 0.38 28 0.34 0.29 40 0.28 53 0.28 89 0.14 14 0.12 Identified, such as attributes of schools, homes, students, teachers, and curricula. The average or typical effect of schooling was 0.40. SE equals 0.05, and this provided a benchmark figure or standard from which to judge the various influences on achievement, such as that of feedback. At least 12 previous meta-analyses have included specific information on feedback in classrooms, Table 1. These meta-analyses included 196 studies and 6,972 effect sizes. The average effect size was 0.79, twice the average effect. To place this average of 0.79 into perspective, it fell in the top 5 to 10 highest influences on achievement in Hattie's 1999 synthesis, along with direct instruction, 0.93, reciprocal teaching, 0.86, students' prior cognitive ability, 0.71, and also can be contrasted with other influences such as acceleration, 0.47, socioeconomic influences, 0.44, homework, 0.41, the use of calculators, 0.24, reducing class size, 0.12, and retention back 1 year, minus 0.12. Clearly, feedback can be powerful. The effect sizes reported in the feedback meta-analyses, however, show considerable variability, indicating that some types of feedback are more powerful. 83 Table 2 Summary of effect sizes relating to feedback effects. Variable number of meta-analyses. Cues 3 Feedback 74 Reinforcement 1 Video or audio feedback 1 Computer-assisted instructional feedback 4 Goals and feedback 8 Student evaluation feedback 3 Corrective feedback 25 Delayed versus immediate 5 Reward 3 Immediate versus delayed 8 Punishment 1 Praise 11 Programmed instruction 1 Number of studies 89 4157 1991 161 640 100 1149 178 223 398 89 388 40 Number of effects 129 5755 19 715 129 121 61 1040 83 508 167 210 4410 23 Effect size 1.10 0.95 0.94 0.64 0.52 0.46 0.42 0.37 0.34 0.31 0.24 0.20 0.14 minus 0.04 than others. Those studies showing the highest effect sizes involved students receiving information feedback about a task and how to do it more effectively. Lower effect sizes were related to praise, rewards, and punishment. A more detailed synthesis of 74 meta-analyses in Hattie's 1999 database that included some information about feedback, across more than 7,000 studies and 13,370 effect sizes, including those in Table 2, demonstrated that the most effective forms of feedback provide cues or reinforcement to learners, are in the form of video, audio, or computer-assisted instructional feedback, and / or relate to goals. Programmed instruction, praise, punishment, and extrinsic rewards were the least effective for enhancing achievement, Table 3. Indeed, it is doubtful whether rewards should be thought of as feedback at all. Deci, Kostner, and Ryan, 1999, described tangible rewards, stickers, awards, etc., as contingencies to activities rather than feedback because they contain such little task information. In their meta-analysis of the effects of feedback on motivation, these authors found a negative correlation between extrinsic rewards and task performance, minus 0.34. Tangible rewards significantly undermined intrinsic motivation, particularly for interesting tasks, minus 0.68, compared with uninteresting tasks, 0.18. In addition, when the feedback was administered in a controlling manner, e.g., saying that students performed as they should have performed, the effects were even worse, minus 0.78. Thus, Deci et al. Concluded that extrinsic rewards are typically negative because they undermine people's taking responsibility for motivating or regulating themselves, p. 659. Rather, they are a controlling strategy that often leads to greater surveillance, evaluation, and competition, all of which have been found to undermine enhanced engagement and regulation, Deci and Ryan, 1985. The most systematic study addressing the effects of various types of feedback was conducted by Kluger and Denisai, 1996. Their meta-analysis included studies of 84 Table 3 Summary of effect sizes relating to types of feedback. Moderator number of effects. Correct feedback tis correct 114 tis incorrect 197 Task feedback about changes from previous trials yes 50 Number 380 Task feedback designed to discourage the student yes 49 Number 388 Praise feedback about the task yes 80 Number 358 Feedback provided from a computer yes 87 Number 337 Number of times feedback was provided lots 97 Little 171 Task complexity very complex 107 Not complex 114 Goal setting difficult goals 37 Easy Do your best goals 373 threat to self-esteem much threat 102 little threat 170 source. Kluger and Denisi, 1996. Effect size 0.43 0.25 0.55 0.28 minus 0.14 0.33 0.09 0.34 0.41 0.23 0.32 0.39 0.03 0.55 0.51 0.30 0.08 0.47 Feedback interventions that were not confounded with other manipulations included at least a control group, measured performance, and included at least 10 participants. Many of their studies were not classroom-based. From the 131 studies, they estimated 470 effect sizes on the basis of 12,652 participants and 23,663 observations, reflecting multiple observations per participant. The average effect size was 0.38, SE equals 0.09, and 32% of the effects were negative, Table 3. Over all comparisons, it appears that the power of feedback is influenced by the direction of the feedback relative to performance on a task. Specifically, feedback is more effective when it provides information on correct rather than incorrect responses and when it builds on changes from previous trails. The impact of feedback was also influenced by the difficulty of goals and tasks. It appears to have the most impact when goals are specific 85 Hattie and Timperley and challenging but task complexity is low. Praise for task performance appears to be ineffective, which is hardly surprising because it contains such little learning-related information. It appears to be more effective when there are perceived low rather than high levels of threat to self-esteem, presumably because low-threat conditions allow attention to be paid to the feedback. Given these mixed effects of feedback, we devote the remainder of this article to identifying the conditions that maximize the positive effects on learning. A model of feedback is used as a framework to understand why particular kinds of feedback promote learning effectively and why some others do not. A model of feedback Figure 1 presents a framework in which feedback can be considered. The claim is made that the main purpose of feedback is to reduce discrepancies between current understandings and performance and a goal. Strategies students and teachers use to reduce this discrepancy may be more or less effective in enhancing learning, so it is important to understand the circumstances that result in the differential outcomes. Effective feedback must answer three major questions asked by a teacher and/or by a student: where am I going? What are the goals? How am I going? What progress is being made toward the goal, and where to next? What activities need to be undertaken to make better progress? These questions correspond to notions of feed up, feedback, and feed forward. How effectively answers to these questions serve to reduce the gap is partly dependent on the level at which the feedback operates. These include the level of task performance, the level of process of understanding how to do a task, the regulatory or metacognitive process level, and/or the self or personal level, unrelated to the specifics of the task. Feedback has differing effects across these levels. A key theme arising from this review of the literature is the importance of ensuring that feedback is targeted at students at the appropriate level, because some feedback is effective in reducing the discrepancy between current understandings and what is desired, and some is ineffective. These issues are explored in greater depth as each aspect of the model is further explored. How feedback works: reducing the discrepancy between current and desired understanding. There are many possible ways for students to reduce the gap between current and desired understandings in response to feedback, and they are not always effective in enhancing learning. Those likely to be effective include the following. Students can increase their effort, particularly when the effort leads to tackling more challenging tasks or appreciating higher quality experiences rather than just doing more. We are more likely to increase effort when the intended goal is clear, when high commitment is secured for it, and when belief in eventual success is high. Kluger and Denisi, 1996, p. 260. Students may also develop effective error detection skills, which lead to their own self-feedback aimed at reaching a goal. Such error detection can be very powerful, provided students have some modicum of knowledge and understanding about the task on which to strategize and regulate. In addition, students can seek better strategies to complete the task or be taught them, or they can obtain more information from which they can then solve problems or use their self-regulatory proficiencies. 86 Figure 1. A model of feedback to enhance learning. Some strategies to reduce the gap are less productive. Students may abandon goals and thus eliminate any gap, and this often leads to non-engagement in the pursuit of further goals. Bandura, 1982, Mikolinser, 1988, Steinberg, 1996. They may choose to blur the goals, combining them with so many others that after performing, they can pick and choose those goals they attained and ignore the others. Alternatively, students can change the standard by setting less challenging goals, accepting performance far below their capabilities as satisfactory. There are also multiple ways teachers can assist in reducing the gap between actual performance and desired goal attainment. These include providing appropriate challenging and specific goals. Specific goals are more effective than general or non-specific ones, primarily because they focus students' attention, and feedback can be more directed. Locke and Latham, 1984. The goals and associated feedback are also more likely to include information about the criteria for success in attaining them than more general goals. Teachers can also assist by clarifying goals, enhancing commitment, or increased effort to reaching them through feedback. Goals can also be made more manageable by narrowing the range of reasonable hypotheses. Sweller, 1990. More generally, teachers can create a learning environment in which students develop self-regulation and error detection skills. Hattie, Biggs, and Purdy, 1996. How feedback contributes to these processes depends largely on the focus of feedback and the level to which it is directed. In the next section, we develop a framework to assist in identifying the circumstances likely to result in the more productive outcomes. 87 Addressing the three feedback questions. Effective teaching not only involves imparting information and understandings to students, or providing constructive tasks, environments, and learning, but also involves assessing and evaluating students' understanding of this information, so that the next teaching act can be matched to the present understanding of the students. This second part is the feedback part, and it relates to the three major questions identified in Figure 1, where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? These three questions address the dimensions of feed up, feedback, and feed forward. An ideal learning environment or experience occurs when both teachers and students seek answers to each of these questions. Too often, teachers limit students' opportunities to receive information about their performance in relation to any of these questions by assuming that responsibility for the students and not considering the learning possibilities for themselves. Where am I going? A critical aspect of feedback is the information given to students and their teachers about the attainment of learning goals related to the task or performance. These goals can be wide-ranging and include items such as singing a song, running a race, noting beauty in a painting, sanding a piece of wood, or riding a bicycle. Judging the success of goal attainment may occur on many dimensions. The judgments may be direct, such as passing a test or completing an assignment; comparative, such as doing better than Mary or doing better than last time; social, such as not getting a detention or seeking teacher approval; engagement related, such as singing a song or running a race; or automatic and triggered outside of specific awareness, such as doing well on a task or seeking more challenging tasks. On this last type, Barg, Gallwitzer, Lichai, Barndala, and Trotzschell, 2001, demonstrated that goals can promote goal-directed action, e.g., achievement or cooperation on tasks, produce persistence at task performance in the face of obstacles, and favor the resumption of disrupted tasks even in the presence of more attractive alternatives. As Black and William, 1998, concluded, the provision of challenging assignments and extensive feedback lead to greater student engagement and higher achievement. p. 13, goals may relate to specific attainments or understandings or to differing qualities of experience, and they typically involve two dimensions, challenge and commitment. Challenging goals relate to feedback in two major ways. First, they inform individuals as to what type or level of performance is to be attained so that they can direct and evaluate their actions and efforts accordingly. Feedback allows them to set reasonable goals and to track their performance in relation to their goals so that adjustments in effort, direction, and even strategy can be made as needed. Locke and Latham, 1990, p. 23, these levels of attainment we have termed success criteria, and goals without clarity as to when and how a student, and teacher, would know they were successful are often too vague to serve the purpose of enhancing learning. Second, feedback allows students, and/or their teachers, to set further appropriately challenging Hattie the Power of feedback goals as the previous ones are attained, thus establishing the conditions for ongoing learning. The relationship between feedback and goal-related challenge is complex. If feedback does not lead to reducing the discrepancy between current understandings and goals, students are likely to close the gap by overstating their current status or claiming various attributions that reduce effort and engagement. Feedback cannot lead to a reduction in this discrepancy if the goal is poorly defined, because the gap between current learning and intended learning is unlikely to be sufficiently clear for students to see a need to reduce it. Early, Northcraft, Lee, and Liducci, 1990, Erez, 1977, Frost and Mahoney, 1976. An additional problem occurs when feedback is not directed toward the attainment of a goal. Too often, the feedback given is unrelated to achieving success on critical dimensions of the goal. For example, students are given feedback on presentation, spelling, and quantity in writing when the criteria for success require, say, creating mood in a story. Such feedback is not effective in reducing the gap relating to the intention of creating mood. Clark, Timperley, and Hattie, 2003, Timperley and Parr, 2005. When goals have appropriate challenge and teachers and students are committed to these goals, a clearer understanding of the criteria for success is likely to be shared. Goals are more effective when students share a commitment to attaining them, because they are more likely to seek and receive feedback. Locke and Latham, 1990. Teachers and parents often assume that students share a commitment to academic goals, whereas the reality is that developing this shared commitment needs to be nurtured and built. Commitment can be induced by authority figures, peer groups, competition, role models, public statements about intentions, incentives and rewards, punishment, and general valence and instrumentality, e.g., Bandura, 1986, Carroll, Houghton, Durkin, and Hattie, 2001, Hollenbeck, Klein, O'Leary, and Wright, 1989, Latham and Lee, 1986, Lee, Locke, and Latham, 1989, Locke and Latham, 1984. For example, Early and Canfer, 1985, showed that modeling can be effective by having participants watch a film of either a high-performing student or a low-performing student completing a class scheduling task. Following this, students were assigned or encouraged to set difficult goals. Those who had observed the high-performing student in the video had significantly higher commitment levels than those who had observed the low-performing role model. How am I going? Answering this question involves a teacher, or peer, task, or self, providing information relative to a task or performance goal, often in relation to some expected standard, to prior performance, and/or to success or failure on a specific part of the task. This aspect of feedback could be termed the feedback dimension. Feedback is effective when it consists of information about progress, and/or about how to proceed. Students often seek information about how they are going, although they may not always welcome the answers. Too often, attention to this question leads to assessment or testing, whereas this is not the fundamental conception underlying this question. Tests are but one method used by teachers and students to address this question and, as discussed below, often fail to convey feedback information that helps teachers and their students to know how they are going. 89. Where to next? Instruction often is sequential, with teachers providing information, tasks, or learning intentions, students attempting tasks, and some subsequent consequence. Too often, the consequence is more information, more tasks, and more expectations. Students thus learn that the answer to where to next is more. The power of feedback, however, can be used to specifically address this question by providing information that leads to greater possibilities for learning. These may include enhanced challenges, more self-regulation over the learning process, greater fluency and automaticity, more strategies and processes to work on the tasks, deeper understanding, and more information about what is and what is not understood. This feed-forward question can have some of the most powerful impacts on learning. Integrating the three questions rather than the above three questions working in isolation at each of the four levels, they typically work together. Feedback relating to how am I going has the power to lead to undertaking further tasks or where to next, relative to a goal where am I going. As Sadler, 1989, convincingly argued, it is closing the gap between where students are and where they are aiming to be that leads to the power of feedback. The focus of feedback, the four levels. The focus of feedback is critically important, and in this article, we claim that there are four major levels and that the level at which feedback is directed influences its effectiveness. First, feedback can be about a task or product, such as whether work is correct or incorrect. This level of feedback may include directions to acquire more, different, or correct information, such as you need to include more about the Treaty of Versailles. Second, feedback can be aimed at the process used to create a product or complete a task. This kind of feedback is more directly aimed at the processing of information, or learning processes requiring understanding or completing the task. For example, a teacher or peer may say to a learner, "You need to edit this piece of writing by attending to the descriptors you have used so the reader is able to understand the nuances of your meaning," or "This page may make more sense if you use the strategies we talked about earlier." Third, feedback to students can be focused at the self-regulation level, including greater skill in self-evaluation or confidence to engage further on a task. For example, you already know the key features of the opening of an argument. Check to see whether you have incorporated them in your first paragraph. Such feedback can have major influences on self-efficacy, self-regulatory proficiencies, and self-beliefs about students as learners, such that the students are encouraged or informed how to better and more effortlessly continue on the task. Fourth, feedback can be personal in the sense that it is directed to the self, which, we argue below, is too often unrelated to performance on the task. Examples of such feedback include "You are a great student and that's an intelligent response, well done." Thus, there is a distinction between feedback about the task, FT, about the processing of the task, FP, about self-regulation, FR, and about the self as a person, FS. We argue that FS is the least effective. FR and FP are powerful in terms of 90 the power of feedback, deep processing and mastery of tasks, and FT is powerful when the task information subsequently is useful for improving strategy processing or enhancing self-regulation, which it too rarely does. Feedback about the task. This level includes feedback about how well a task is being accomplished or performed, such as distinguishing correct from incorrect answers, acquiring more or different information, and building more surface knowledge. This type of feedback is most common and is often called corrective feedback or knowledge of results, and it can relate to correctness, neatness, behavior, or some other criterion related to task accomplishment. About 90% of teachers' questions, sometimes written but typically verbal, in classrooms are aimed at this information level. Arashian, 1997. Teachers commonly mix corrective feedback with information at the self level, which dilutes the power of the FT, e.g., "Good boy, that is correct." See Bennett and Kell, 1989. By itself, corrective feedback can be powerful. From various meta-analyses, Lysakowski and Wahlberg, 1982, reported an effect size of 1.13, Wahlberg, 1982, reported 0.82, and Tenenbaum and Goldring, 1989, reported 0.74, all of which are substantial effects. Having correct information is a pedestal on which the processing and self-regulation is effectively built. FT is more powerful when it is about faulty interpretations, not lack of information. If students lack necessary knowledge, further instruction is more powerful than feedback information. One of the problems with feedback at the task level is that it often does not generalize to other tasks. Thompson, 1998, for example, demonstrated that improvement was specific to the questions for which feedback was provided and was not used to answer other questions. Feedback aimed to move students from task to processing and then from processing to regulation is most effective. Too much feedback within a level may even detract from performance. For example, FT that provides very specific information about the correctness of the minutiae of tasks and is not also directed to the processing required to complete the task can direct attention below the level necessary for high-level performance and thus interfere with task accomplishment. Kluger and Denisai, 1996. In the case of a rotating a turtle in a logo simulation, Simmons and Cope, 1993, found that when FT was too specific, the students were unable to build up an estimate of rotation by successive increments. When the immediate feedback specific to each performance was reduced, strategies were promoted that involved more of the problem elements representing higher-level responses. Hence, too much feedback only at the task level may encourage students to focus on the immediate goal and not the strategies to attain the goal. It can lead to more trial and error strategies and less cognitive effort to develop informal hypotheses about the relationship between the instructions, the feedback, and the intended learning. Wynne and Butler, 1994, argued that the benefits of FT depend heavily on learners, a. being attentive to the varying importance of the feedback information during study of the task, b. having accurate memories of those features when outcome feedback is provided at the task's conclusion, and c. being sufficiently strategic to generate effective internal feedback about predictive validities, e.g., which factors boost my performance. It is likely that feedback at this task level is most beneficial when it helps students reject erroneous hypotheses and provides cues as to 91 Hattie and Timperley directions for searching and strategizing. Such cues can sensitize students to the competence or strategy information in a task or situation. Harakiwas, 1979, Harakiwas, Mabderlink, and Sansone, 1984. Feedback relating specifically to the task can be conceived along a number of dimensions, such as high to low complexity, individual or group performance, and written or numeric notations. Simple more than complex task performance benefits from FT, Balzer, Doherty, and O'Connor, 1989. Similarly, simple rather than complex FT tends to be more effective. Kulabi, White, Top, Chan, and Adams, 1985, provided students with reading passages and multiple choice items with increasingly complex feedback provided. First they were given the correct answer, and then they discussed the 4 incorrect responses. Each sentence of the passage was subsequently read and used to explain why one of the error choices was incorrect, and finally the relevant section of the passage in which the correct answer was identified. The less complex feedback that provided the correct answer resulted in higher levels of subsequent task performance than the more complex versions of the feedback, for which the effect was small. It may be, the authors conjectured, that providing additional information about the incorrect responses actually increased the likelihood that the error was remembered by the learner. Alternatively, it may be that students processed extra feedback information at a more surface level, because they did not perceive it as being directly related to the issue of identifying a correct response. However, these results were mediated by the reader's confidence in their responses. Those with high response confidence, who had little trouble understanding or interacting with the material, were more likely to make efficient use of the feedback whatever its complexity. Feedback, particularly at this task level, can be delivered and received in both individual and group situations. When delivered in groups, the feedback messages may be confounded by the perceptions of relevance to oneself or to other group members. For example, a student may interpret the feedback as pertaining to him or her, or may interpret it as relating to the group as a whole or to other individuals in the group. In these latter two situations, it is likely either to be diluted or to be perceived as irrelevant to the individual student's performance. Nadler, 1979. The effectiveness of FT in these situations depends very much on students' commitment and involvement in the task and on their notions about whether it relates to their performance. The effectiveness of marks or written comments has also been investigated. There is considerable evidence that providing written comments, specific FT, is more effective than providing grades. Black and William, 1998, Crooks, 1988. In one of the early and influential studies, Page, 1958, found that feedback in the form of short written comments rather than grades alone significantly improved the test performance of students in 74 classrooms. See also Cardell and Corno, 1981, Elawar and Corno, 1985, McLaughlin, 1974. R. Butler, 1987, demonstrated that grades can increase involvement, but they do not affect performance, relative to a no FT condition. She also showed, R. Butler, 1988, that feedback through comments alone led to learning gains, whereas marks alone or comments accompanied by marks or giving praise did not. She claimed that such results called in question the whole classroom culture of marks, grades, gold stars, merit awards, competition rather than personal improvement. As will become a theme later in this article, feedback that mixes FS with FT is less effective than FT by itself. 92. Feedback about the processing of the task FP is more specific to the processes underlying tasks or relating and extending tasks. Such feedback concerns information about relations in the environment, relations perceived by a person, and relations between the environment and the person's perceptions. Balzer et al., 1989. A surface understanding of learning involves the acquisition, storing, reproduction, and use of knowledge and thus relates more to FT. A deep understanding of learning involves the construction of meaning, understanding, and relates more to the relationships, cognitive processes, and transference to other more difficult or untried tasks. Martin, Dal Alba, and Beatty, 1993, Purdy, Hattie, and Douglas, 1996, SLJ, 1979, Watkins and Regmi, 1992, Watkins, Regmi, and Astilla, 1991. A major type of FP relates to students' strategies for error detection, thus providing oneself with feedback. Such errors may indicate failure and a need to re-strategize, to choose different strategies, to be more effective in applying strategies, or to seek help. Whether students engage in error correction strategies following error detection depends on their motivation to continue to pursue the goal or to reduce the gap between current knowledge and the goal. Carver and Shire, 1981, 1982, 1990, argued that when a student encounters an impediment, such as detecting an error, while pursuing a goal, a reassessment of the situation is triggered. In considering their reassessments, students estimate how probable it is that they can achieve their goals if they invest further effort, modify their plans, or both. Feedback information about the processes underlying a task also can act as a cueing mechanism and lead to more effective information search and use of task strategies. Cues are most useful when they assist students in rejecting erroneous hypotheses and provide direction for searching and strategizing. Early, 1988, Harakiwas, 1979, Harakiwas et al., 1984, Wood and Bandura, 1987. This type of feedback is akin to D. L. Butler and Wins, 1995, notion of task validity feedback, which brings to a learner's attention the relationship between a cue, such as the presence and use of an advance organizer, and the probability of successful performance. P. 262. Feedback at the process level appears to be more effective than at the task level for enhancing deeper learning, e.g., Balzer et al., 1989. Early et al., 1990, claimed that using process feedback with goal setting appears to be a direct and powerful way of shaping an individual's task strategy, and using outcome feedback is a much less efficient way of shaping strategy, p. 103. It needs to be noted, however, that there can be a powerful interactive effect between feedback aimed at improving the strategies and processes and feedback aimed at the more surface task information. The latter can assist in improving task confidence and self-efficacy, which in turn provides resources for more effective and innovative information and strategy searching, Early ETAL, 1990. Feedback about self-regulation. Self-regulation involves an interplay between commitment, control, and confidence. It addresses the way students monitor, direct, and regulate actions toward the learning goal. It implies autonomy, self-control, self-direction, and self-discipline. Such regulation involves self-generated thoughts, feelings, and actions. 93. Hattie and Timperley that are planned and cyclically adapted to the attainment of personal goals, Zimmerman, 2000, p. 14, and can lead to seeking, accepting, and accommodating feedback information. There are at least 6 major aspects of FR that mediate the effectiveness of feedback, discussed in more detail below. By way of overview, these include the capability to create internal feedback and to self-assess, the willingness to invest effort into seeking and dealing with feedback information, the degree of confidence or certainty in the correctness of the response, the attributions about success or failure, and the level of proficiency at seeking help. Effective learners create internal feedback and cognitive routines while they are engaged in academic tasks. D. L. Butler and Wynne, 1995, argued that for all self-regulated activities, feedback is an inherent catalyst. As learners monitor their engagement with tasks, internal feedback is generated by the monitoring process. That feedback describes the nature of outcomes and the qualities of the cognitive processes that led to those states. We hypothesize that more effective learners develop idiosyncratic cognitive routines for creating internal feedback while they are engaged with academic tasks. p. 245, less effective learners have minimal self-regulation strategies, and they depend much more on external factors, such as the teacher or the task, for feedback. They rarely seek or incorporate feedback in ways that will enhance their future learning or self-regulation strategies. Self-assessment is a self-regulatory proficiency that is powerful in selecting and interpreting information in ways that provide feedback. There are 2 major aspects of self-assessment, self-appraisal and self-management, Paris and Winograd, 1990. Self-appraisal relates to students' facility to review and evaluate their abilities, knowledge states, and cognitive strategies through a variety of self-monitoring processes. Self-management is the monitoring and regulating of students' ongoing behavior through planning, correcting mistakes, and using fix-up strategies. When students have the metacognitive skills of self-assessment, they can evaluate their levels of understanding, their effort, and strategies used on tasks, their attributions and opinions of others about their performance, and their improvement in relation to their goals and expectations. They can also assess their performance relative to others' goals and the global aspects of their performance. As students become more experienced at self-assessment, multiple dimensions of performance can be assessed, Paris and Cunningham, 1996. Most important, students know how and when to seek and receive feedback from others. Students' willingness to invest effort in seeking and dealing with feedback information relates to the transaction costs invoked at the self-regulatory level. These transaction costs include effort costs, the effort necessary for feedback search, face costs, the evaluative effects of others on the individual for seeking feedback, and inference costs, the implications of inferential errors resulting from inaccurately interpreting feedback, Ashford and Cummings, 1983, DeLuke and Sommer, 2000. The benefit incurred to offset these costs is a reduction in the gap between current and desired or expected performance. It is the existence of evaluative uncertainty that makes seeking feedback worth incurring the related costs, Trope, 1975, 1980. When the cost/benefit ratio becomes prohibitive, however, people refrain from seeking feedback. 94 The power of feedback. Decisions about whether to seek feedback are not only governed by this cost/benefit ratio. In general, feedback is psychologically reassuring, and people like to obtain feedback about their performance even if it has no impact on their performance. Ashford and Cummings, 1983, p. 277. It is important, therefore, not to confuse feelings that feedback is desirable with the question of whether feedback benefits performance. The degree of confidence that students have in the correctness of responses can affect receptivity to and seeking of feedback. Kulavi and Stock, 1989, noted that if confidence or response certainty is high and the response turns out to be a correct one, little attention is paid to the feedback. Feedback has its greatest effect when a learner expects a response to be correct and it turns out to be wrong. As Kulavi and Stock noted, high confidence errors are the point at which feedback should play its greatest corrective role, simply because the person studies the item longer in an attempt to correct the misconception. p. 225. Conversely, if response certainty is low and the response turns out to be wrong, feedback is largely ignored. In these circumstances, low confidence places a student in a position requiring associative strategies rather than the integration of new information into existing structures. Under this condition, feedback should have minimal effect regardless of whether or not the response is the correct one. Kulavi, 1977, p. 226. Further instruction and information are more effective than feedback in this situation. Feelings of self-efficacy are important mediators in feedback situations. From their major review, Kluger and Denisai, 1996, concluded that feedback is effective to the degree to which it directs information to enhanced self-efficacy and to more effective self-regulation, such that attention is directed back to the task and causes students to invest more effort or commitment to the task. These authors claimed that such feedback is likely to yield impressive gains in performance, possibly exceeding 1 SD, p. 278. Students' attributions about success or failure can often have more impact than the reality of that success or failure. There can be deleterious effects on feelings of self-efficacy and performance when students are unable to relate the feedback to the cause of their poor performance. Unclear evaluative feedback, which fails to clearly specify the grounds on which students have met with achievement success or otherwise, is likely to exacerbate negative outcomes, engender uncertain self-images, and lead to poor performance. Thompson, 1997, 1998, 1999, Thompson and Richardson, 2001. On the flip side, undeserved success feedback increases outcome uncertainty and can lead to increases in self-handicapping strategies. Smith, Snyder, and Handelsman, 1982. As Berglass and Jones, 1978, claimed, self-handicapping stems from a capricious, chaotic feedback reinforcement history, suggesting that it is not that their histories are pocketed with repeated failure, they have been amply rewarded, but in ways and on occasions that leave them deeply uncertain about what the reward was for. p. 407. There is considerable evidence that feedback that attributes performance to effort or ability increases engagement and performance on tasks. Craven, Marsh, and DeBus, 1991, Dorn and Bryan, 1994. The impact of feedback about effort or ability, however, may depend on circumstances. Shunk and Rice, 1991, for example, highlighted the need to explore such feedback over extended periods, because students may respond differently to the feedback depending on the stage of task accomplishment. Effort feedback appears to be credible in the early stages 95 Hattie and Timperley of learning, when students need to expend effort to succeed. As skills develop, and success should require less effort, ability feedback may become more credible. Ability feedback, however, may detract from the learning focus of goals. Mueller and Dweck, 1998, for example, conducted a series of 6 studies with elementary students and found that students provided with ability feedback were more performance than learning-oriented and reported poorer performance and lower enjoyment of tasks after a failure. Seeking help is a learner proficiency, and many types of help-seeking behavior can be considered aspects of self-regulation. A major distinction is made between instrumental help-seeking, asking for hints rather than answers, and executive help-seeking, asking for answers or direct help that avoids time or work. Nelson L. E. Gall, 1981, 1985, Ryan and Pintrich, 1977. Higher levels of instrumental help-seeking lead to feedback at the self-regulation levels, whereas executive help-seeking is more likely to relate to the task level and sometimes the processing level. When considering how to develop instrumental help-seeking behavior, it is important to keep in mind it is mediated by emotional factors. Many students do not seek help because of perceived threats to self-esteem or social embarrassment. Karabenik and Knapp, 1991, Newman and Schwager, 1993. Feedback about the self as a person. We include a final level of feedback not because it is effective but because it is often present in class situations and too often used instead of FT, FP, or FR. Bond, Smith, Baker, and Hattie, 2000. Personal feedback, such as good girl or great effort, typically expresses positive, and sometimes negative, evaluations and effect about the student. Brophy, 1981. It usually contains little task-related information and is rarely converted into more engagement, commitment to the learning goals, enhanced self-efficacy, or understanding about the task. FS can have an impact on learning only if it leads to changes in students' effort, engagement, or feelings of efficacy in relation to the learning or to the strategies they use when attempting to understand tasks. The effects at the self level are too diluted, too often uninformative about performing the task, and too influenced by students' self-concept to be effective. The information has too little value to result in learning gains. Praise addressed to students is unlikely to be effective, because it carries little information that provides answers to any of the three questions and too often deflects attention from the task. Various meta-analyses have demonstrated its ineffectiveness. Wilkinson, 1981, completed a meta-analysis on teacher praise and concluded that it bears little, if any, relationship to student achievement. Overall effect equals 0.12. Kluger and Denisai, 1998, also reported a similarly low effect size for praise, 0.09, and found that no praise has a greater impact on achievement, 0.34. It is important, however, to distinguish between praise that directs attention away from the task to the self, because such praise has low information value to achievement and learning, and praise directed to the effort, self-regulation, engagement, or processes relating to the task and its performance, e.g., you're really great because you have diligently completed this task by applying this concept. This latter type of praise can assist in enhancing self-efficacy and thus can be converted by students back into impact on the task, and hence the effects are 96. The power of feedback much greater. It seems likely, from reading these meta-analyses, however, that reviewers do not always distinguish between praise as a reinforcer or reward, for which it has zero to limited effect on achievement, and praise accompanied by information about the processes or performance, which has more, but still limited, effect. These concerns about praise are not the same as claiming that students do not like to be praised. They do. Sharp, 1985, reported that 26% of the adolescent students in his sample preferred to be praised loudly and publicly when they achieved on an academic task, 64% preferred to be praised quietly and privately, and only 10% preferred teachers to say nothing at all. Burnett, 2002, and Elwell and Tiberio, 1994, reported a similar percentage among elementary students and found that students preferred praise for trying hard rather than for having high ability, especially when the praise was public, and for achievement rather than for behavior. On the other hand, praise delivered publicly by a teacher can be perceived as punishing by some students if delivered in the presence of a peer group that does not esteem school achievement as valuable. Brophy, 1981, Carroll et al., 2001, Carroll, Durkin, Hattie, and Houghton, 1997, White and Jones, 2000. Praise may be counterproductive and have negative consequences on students' self-evaluations of their ability. Meyer, Bachman, Hempelmann, Plager, and Spiller, 1979, and Meyer, 1982, conducted a series of studies related to this issue. These authors demonstrated that older students perceived praise after success or neutral feedback after failure as an indication that the teacher perceived their ability to be low. When given criticism after failure and neutral feedback after success, they perceived that the teacher had estimated their ability to be high and their effort low. The same effects were not evident for younger students, however, who perceived praise after success as an indication of high ability and criticism after failure as a sign of low ability. Part of the reason for the unpredictability of praise is that students often adopt reputational lenses to seek or evaluate feedback information aimed at the self-level, e.g., I want to be seen as a good student, I do not want to be seen as a good student. Students do a lot of in-the-head comparisons, Goethals, Messick, and Allison, 1991, and it is likely that such comparisons are selected, interpreted, and/or biased. Strengths and positive performances are seen as unique and self-created, whereas weakness and negative performances are seen as common in others and possibly caused by others. Campbell, 1986, Goethals, 1986, Klein, 2001, Sulz and Wan, 1987. Such reputational lenses and biases, unless they lead to more investment in the task or to the use of better strategies to accomplish the task, are of low effectiveness. Carroll et al., 2001. One of the difficulties with these in-the-head comparisons occurs because they are rarely tied to specific tasks but rather tend to be more generalized at the self-level, and thus they can be difficult for teachers to change. Craven, 1997, Hattie, 1992, although they help explain why feedback directed at the self-level is usually dissipated and ineffective in increasing engagement or understanding of tasks. Typically, these strategies have a negative effect on learning. Hattie and Marsh, 1995, because they include or lead to self-handicapping, learned hopelessness, or social comparison. The related feedback itself is usually discounted or dismissed, and goals of low challenge are adopted. 97. Using the 4 levels and 3 questions to untangle some thorny feedback issues. The model presented in Figure 1 is used to address 4 commonly debated issues about feedback: the timing of feedback, the effects of positive and negative feedback, the optimal classroom use of feedback, and the role of assessment in feedback. The timing of feedback. There has been much research on the timing of feedback, particularly contrasting immediate and delayed feedback. Most of this research has been accomplished without recognition of the various feedback levels. For example, immediate error correction during task acquisition, FT, can result in faster rates of acquisition, whereas immediate error correction during fluency building can detract from the learning of automaticity and the associated strategies of learning, FP. Similarly, in their meta-analysis of 53 studies, Kulik and Kulik, 1988, reported that at the task level, i.e., testing situations, some delay is beneficial, 0.36, but at the process level, i.e., engaging in processing classroom activities, immediate feedback is beneficial, 0.28. See also Bangert-Drowns, Kulik, and Morgan, 1991, Brackbill, Blobit, Davlin, and Wagner, 1963, Schroth and Lund, 1993, Sturges, 1972, 1978, Swindell and Walls, 1993. Another example demonstrating that the effects of immediate feedback are likely to be more powerful for FT and delayed feedback more powerful for FP was provided by Claraiana, Wagner, and Roher Murphy, 2000. They found that the effectiveness of delayed compared with immediate feedback varied as a function of the difficulty of items in their test of information taught in a series of lessons. The effect sizes from delayed feedback were -0.06 for easy items, 0.35 for mid-range items, and 1.17 for difficult items. These authors suggested that difficult items are more likely to involve greater degrees of processing about the task, and delayed feedback provides the opportunity to do this, whereas easy items do not require this processing, and so delay is both unnecessary and undesirable. The effects of positive and negative feedback. Kluger and Denisai, 1996, noted that both positive and negative feedback can have beneficial effects on learning, and the argument presented in this article is that the untangling of these effects depends more on the level at which the feedback is aimed and processed than on whether it is positive or negative. Specifically, negative feedback is more powerful at the self level, and both types can be effective as FT, but there are differential effects relating to commitment, mastery, or performance orientation, and self-efficacy at the FR level. At the self level, FS, it has already been noted that no praise is more effective than praise if accompanied by FT. Furthermore, there is much evidence to suggest that negative feedback or disconfirmation can be more potent than positive feedback or confirmation at the self level. Brockner, 1979, Brunet, Huguet, and Monteil, 2000, Campbell and Ferry, 1985, Hattie, 1992, Janoff Bowman and Brickman, 1982, Kinch, 1963, 1968, Oken and Sassfight, 1977, Schrager and Sorman, 1977. Swan, 1985, and Swan and Hill, 1982, found that individuals will go to great lengths to confirm their self-perceptions by attending most closely to feedback information. That 98 The power of feedback fits their view of the self, and by trying to arrange their environment to acquire further self-confirming evidence. Individuals also tend to reject or ignore negative accounts of their behavior that differ from their own. Greenwald, 1980, Marcus, 1977, Tesser and Campbell, 1983, or invoke an external frame of reference. Marsh, 1987, 1990. At the self-regulation level, the commitment to goals is a major mediator of the effectiveness of positive and negative feedback. Van Dijk and Kluger, 2000, 2001, demonstrated that positive feedback increases motivation relative to negative feedback for a task that people want to do, and decreases motivation relative to negative feedback for a task that people have to do. Thus, when we are committed to a goal, we are more likely to learn as a function of positive feedback, but when we undertake a task that we are not committed to, and hence have to do, we are more likely to learn as a function of negative feedback. We need to be driven, in the older motivation terminology. It is likely, however, that this effect is short-lived in that it may lead to future task avoidance behavior. In circumstances in which students are committed to the goals, feedback can trigger an internal comparison process, which determines how individuals react to feedback. Upon receiving negative feedback, individuals become more dissatisfied with their previous performance level, set higher performance goals for their future performance, and perform at a higher level than those who receive positive feedback or no feedback at all. Podsikoff and Farha, 1989, p. 62, positive feedback, however, can increase the likelihood that students will return to or persist in an activity and self-report higher interest in the activity. DeCetal, 1999. There is also an interaction effect at this FR level between positive and negative feedback and the self-efficacy of students. Swan, Pelham, and Chidester, 1988, found that for highly self-efficacious students, feedback about initial success may signify a talent or potential ability, which leads to better coping in the face of disconfirmation feedback. They related the feedback to positive verifications of themselves as learners. As a consequence of disconfirmation feedback, highly self-efficacious people make more optimistic predictions about their performance after initial failure than after initial success, and they seek specifically unfavorable feedback to excel at the tasks. For the low self-efficacious students, positive feedback about initial success may confirm that they have deficiencies that need to be remedied, which can lead to a variety of reactions. One reaction may be further engagement to remedy these deficiencies to reach a passable level of performance, which would afford protection against failure. Alternatively, these students may avoid tasks and feedback following initial success, because such success signifies that they have already reached an adequate level of performance, and further tests merely run the risk of disconfirming the, sometimes hard-gained, favorable outcome. Disconfirmatory feedback can also have a negative impact on subsequent motivation and performance for low self-efficacious students. Brockner, Dare, and Lang, 1987, Moreland and Sweeney, 1984. Kernes, Brockner, and Frankel, 1989, argued that low self-efficacious people are more likely to react to negative feedback. By 1999, Hattie and Timperley experiencing negative affect, exhibiting less motivation on a subsequent task, and attributing the feedback less to effort and more to ability. At the task level, FT, it has already been noted how powerful corrective feedback is for enhancing learning, particularly when learning new skills or tasks. Disconfirmation with corrective information can be effective, but disconfirmation without this information is of little use because it provides no information regarding what to do or how to respond next time. Brayaquel, 1983, Wiener, 1974a, 1974b, 1977. It is acknowledged that FT can be ignored by students if it is poorly presented or if the student's knowledge is insufficient to accommodate additional feedback information. Howie, S.Y., Ford, and Vicente, 2000, found that it was the poor presentation, or lack of information value in the feedback, rather than students' faulty knowledge that more often explain the low power of some feedback information. Feedback in classrooms. This feedback model highlights the demands on teachers if they are to teach effectively. First, they need to undertake effective instruction. To reiterate, feedback is what happens second, and to make the feedback effective, teachers need to make appropriate judgments about when, how, and at what level to provide appropriate feedback and to which of the three questions it should be addressed. It is difficult to document the frequency of feedback in classrooms, except to note that it is low. Bond et al., 2000, intensively documented the daily life of 65 teachers, half who had passed national board certification and half who had not. Although feedback was one of the variables that most discriminated between those who did and did not pass certification as accomplished teachers, the frequency of FT was low in the classrooms of both groups. The most common form of feedback was praise. When feedback is given, it is likely to be self-related, FS, or at best corrective task-related, FT, and to be influenced by perceptions of students' need. Teachers give poor students more praise, FS, and the little FR provided is typically negative. Blote, 1995. Teacher feedback to boys is more related to a lack of effort or poor behavior, and feedback to girls is more about ability attributions. Dweck, Davidson, Nelson, and Enna, 1978. Feedback is not only differentially given but also differentially received. Deal and Sturman, 1995, Page and Sturman, 1993, Sturman, 1989. DeLuke and Sommer, 2000, found that students from collectivist cultures, e.g., Confucian-based Asia, South Pacific nations, preferred indirect and implicit feedback, more group-focused feedback, and no self-level feedback. Students from individualist cultures, e.g., the United States, preferred more direct feedback particularly related to effort, were more likely to use direct inquiry to seek feedback, and preferred more individual-focused self-related feedback. The climate of the classroom is critical, particularly if disconfirmation and corrective feedback at any level is to be welcomed and used by the students and teachers. Errors and disconfirmation are most powerful in climates in which they are seen as leading to future learning, particularly relating to processing and regulation. Student engagement in learning is likely to be constrained by the evaluative dimensions of classroom lessons because there is personal risk involved in responding publicly and failing. Too often, the level of risk is determined by the 100 the power of feedback likelihood that a student can supply an answer and by the accountability climate set up by the teacher and other students. Alton Lee and Nuthall, 1990, 1998, Doyle, 1983. Typically, Students respond only when they are fairly sure that they can respond correctly, which often indicates they have already learned the answer to the question being asked. Errors, and learning from them, are rarely welcomed. Simply providing more feedback is not the answer, because it is necessary to consider the nature of the feedback, the timing, and how a student receives this feedback, or, better, actively seeks the feedback. As already noted, students can bias and select feedback information. The ways and manner in which individuals interpret feedback information is the key to developing positive and valuable concepts of self-efficacy about learning, which in turn leads to further learning. Teachers need to view feedback from the perspective of the individuals engaged in the learning and become proactive in providing information addressing the 3 feedback questions and developing ways for students to ask these questions of themselves. Students, too often, view feedback as the responsibility of someone else, usually teachers, whose job it is to provide feedback information by deciding for the students how well they are going, what the goals are, and what to do next. Feedback and assessment. There are major implications from this review of feedback for assessment in the classroom. Assessment can be considered to be activities that provide teachers and/or students with feedback information relating to one or more of the 3 feedback questions, at the FT, FP, or FR level. Such a definition places emphasis on devising assessment tasks that provide information and interpretations about the discrepancy between current status and the learning goals at any of the 3 levels, about tasks, about the processes or strategies to understand the tasks, and about the regulation, engagement, and confidence to become more committed to learn. This contrasts with the more usual definition of assessment, an activity used to assess students' levels of proficiency. This usual definition places more emphasis on the adequacy of scores, and less on the interpretation of these scores. Crooks, 1988, and Black and William, 1998, demonstrated there is little evidence that such classroom testing has assisted in the learning process. Black and William, for example, reviewed 578 publications relating to the role of assessment in learning and concluded that classroom assessment typically encourages superficial and rote learning, concentrating on recall of isolated details, usually items of knowledge which pupils soon forget. Teachers do not generally review the assessment questions that they use and do not discuss them critically with peers, so there is little reflection on what is being assessed. P17, too often, the power of assessment feedback is aimed to drive students toward, often unspecified, goals or to do more or do better. Students receive little feedback information in these instances, primarily because the assessment feedback does not address the 3 major questions, and rarely does such feedback enhance the processes, FP, and metacognitive attributes, FR, of the task. Furthermore, teachers too often see assessment feedback as making statements about students, not about their teaching. Timperley and Wiseman, 2002. Thus, the benefits of feedback in the classroom from such testing are often diluted. 101 Hattie and Timperley. There are many ways in which teachers can deliver feedback to students and for students to receive feedback from teachers, peers, and other sources. The implication is not that we should automatically use more tests. Bangert Drowns, Kulik and Kulik, 1991. Rather, for students, it means gaining information about how and what they understand and misunderstand, finding directions and strategies that they must take to improve, and seeking assistance to understand the goals of the learning. For teachers, it means devising activities and questions that provide feedback to them about the effectiveness of their teaching, particularly so they know what to do next. Assessments can perform all these feedback functions, but too often, they are devoid of effective feedback to students or to teachers. Conclusions. Feedback is information provided by an agent, e.g., teacher, peer, book, parent, experience, regarding aspects of one's performance or understanding. It occurs typically after instruction that seeks to provide knowledge and skills or to develop particular attitudes. The model proposed in this article identifies 3 major feedback questions: where am I going? How am I going? And where to next? The answers to these questions enhance learning when there is a discrepancy between what is understood and what is aimed to be understood. It can increase effort, motivation, or engagement to reduce this discrepancy, or it can increase cue searching and task processes that lead to understanding, thus reducing this discrepancy. Feedback is among the most critical influences on student learning. A major aim of the educative process is to assist in identifying these gaps, how am I going, relative to where am I going, and to provide remediation in the form of alternative or other steps, where to next. The model discriminates between 4 levels of feedback: the task, the processing, the regulatory, and the self levels. Effective feedback at the task, process, and self-regulatory levels is interrelated. FT is more powerful when it results from faulty interpretations, not a lack of understanding. It is most effective when it aids in building cues and information regarding erroneous hypotheses and ideas and then leads to the development of more effective and efficient strategies for processing and understanding the material. Feedback at the process level is most beneficial when it helps students reject erroneous hypotheses and provides cues to directions for searching and strategizing. Such cues sensitize students to the competence or strategy information in a task or situation. Ideally, it moves from the task to the processes or understandings necessary to learn the task to regulation about continuing beyond the task to more challenging tasks and goals. This process results in higher confidence and greater investment of effort. This flow typically occurs as students gain greater fluency and mastery. Feedback that attends to self-regulation is powerful to the degree that it leads to further engagement with or investing further effort into the task, to enhanced self-efficacy, and to attributions that the feedback is deserved and earned. When feedback draws attention to the regulatory processes needed to engage with a task, learners' beliefs about the importance of effort and their conceptions of learning can be important moderators in the learning process. Feedback at the self or personal level, usually praise, on the other hand, is rarely effective. Praise is rarely directed at addressing the 3 feedback questions and so is ineffective in enhancing learning. When feedback draws attention to the 102 the power of feedback self, students try to avoid the risks involved in tackling challenging assignments, to minimize effort, and have a high fear of failure. Black and William, 1998, to minimize the risk to the self. The 3 feedback questions are certainly not linearly interpreted or implemented, and the boundaries between them are fuzzy. Although it is important to know about goals, learning experiences do not necessarily begin by asking what are the goals, because these can be discovered, usually in more specific ways, as we undertake particular tasks. Goals can be many and sometimes competing, and much of the learning that accrues can lead to creating options to achieve the goals, weighing the pros and cons of options, considering the likelihood that a given course of action will lead to the goals, and learning about and evaluating the consequences of achieving the goals. Thus, goals may be constantly at issue, and the feedback about how am I going, can help in these evolving goal-related considerations. Similarly, the answer to where to next, may be nowhere. If the goal is unchanging, the outcome is further engagement with the same or similar tasks, or the student believes that the answer is wherever the teacher tells me to go. Such reactions typically indicate low self-regulation or overly dominant classroom regimes. The answer to where to next needs to be more directed to the refinement and seeking of more challenging goals, because these have the highest likelihood of leading to greater achievement. It should be clear that providing and receiving feedback requires much skill by students and teachers. The model advanced in this article does not merely invoke a stimulus and response routine but requires high proficiency in developing a classroom climate, the ability to deal with the complexities of multiple judgments, and deep understandings of the subject matter to be ready to provide feedback about tasks or the relationships between ideas, willingness to encourage self-regulation, and having exquisite timing to provide feedback before frustration takes over. To be able to devote time and thoughts to feedback is aided when teachers automate many other tasks in the classroom and provide rich learning opportunities for all students and thus have the time and resources to be responsive to feedback. Hattie and Yeager, 1998. The model firmly identifies that feedback involves both the giving and receiving, by teachers and/or by students, and there can be gulfs between these. Students construct their worlds of learning and classrooms, and it is a major argument of this article that it is crucial for teachers to understand and appreciate that providing feedback is only a part of the equation. Similarly, some tasks more than others can lead to more effective feedback by teachers, students, or both. Learning can be enhanced to the degree that students share the challenging goals of learning, adopt self-assessment and evaluation strategies, and develop error detection procedures and heighten self-efficacy to tackle more challenging tasks, leading to mastery and understanding of lessons. Students' self-strategies and help-seeking can mediate whether these effects occur. Students who wish to confirm positive self-belief rather than focus on learning goals are more likely to adopt or seek feedback that maximizes positive self-evaluations and/or minimizes negative self-evaluations. A number of self-strategies were identified that inhibit the effects of feedback on learning, and it is only when students are grounded in and committed to the goals of learning and when the feedback is related to accomplishments of the learning that feedback is effective. Crocker and Wolf, 2001. A major task for teachers and 103 Hattie and Timperley parents is to make academic goals salient for all students, because students who are prepared to question or reflect on what they know and understand are more likely to seek confirmatory and/or disconfirmatory feedback that allows for the best opportunities for learning. Feedback, however, is not the answer, rather, it is but one powerful answer. With inefficient learners, it is better for a teacher to provide elaborations through instruction than to provide feedback on poorly understood concepts. If feedback is directed at the right level, it can assist students to comprehend, engage, or develop effective strategies to process the information intended to be learned. To be effective, feedback needs to be clear, purposeful, meaningful, and compatible with students' prior knowledge and to provide logical connections. It also needs to prompt active information processing on the part of learners, have low task complexity, relate to specific and clear goals, and provide little threat to the person at the self level. The major discriminator is whether it is clearly directed to the task, processes, and/or regulation and not to the self level. These conditions highlight the importance of classroom climates that foster peer and self-assessment and allow for learning from mistakes. There are major implications for the design of assessments. Too often, assessments are used to provide snapshots of learning rather than providing information that can be used by students or their teachers to address the three feedback questions. Certainly, a critical conclusion is that teachers need to seek and learn from feedback, such as from students' responses to tests, as much as do students, and only when assessment provides such learning is it of value to either. Most current assessments provide minimal feedback, too often because they rely on recall and are used as external accountability thermometers rather than as feedback devices that are integral to the teaching and learning process. It is the feedback information and interpretations from assessments, not the numbers or grades, that matter. In too many cases, testing is used as the measure to judge whether change has occurred rather than as a mechanism to further enhance and consolidate learning by teachers or students. The costs of these thermometer-related accountability tests are high, and the feedback returns are minimal. Shepard et al., 1996. On the other hand, when feedback is combined with effective instruction in classrooms, it can be very powerful in enhancing learning. As Kluger and Denisai, 1996, noted, a feedback intervention provided for a familiar task, containing cues that support learning, attracting attention to feedback standard discrepancies at the task level, and void of cues that direct attention to the self is likely to yield impressive gains in students' performance. It is important to note, however, that under particular circumstances, instruction is more effective than feedback. Feedback can only build on something, it is of little use when there is no initial learning or surface information. Feedback is what happens second, is one of the most powerful influences on learning, too rarely occurs, and needs to be more fully researched by qualitatively and quantitatively investigating how feedback works in the classroom and learning process. References: Arashian, P.W., 1997. Classroom Assessment, 3rd ed. New York, McGraw-Hill. Alton Lee, A., and Nuthall, G., 1990. Research on Teaching and Learning, 30 Years of Change. Elementary School Journal, 90, 547-570. 104 The Power of Feedback Alton Lee, A., and Nuthall, G., 1998. Inclusive Instructional Design, Theoretical Principles Emerging from the Understanding Learning and Teaching Project, Report to the Ministry of Education, Understanding Learning and Teaching Project 3. Wellington, New Zealand, Ministry of Education, Research Division. Ashford, S.J., and Cummings, L.L., 1983. Feedback as an Individual Resource, Personal Strategies of Creating Information. Organizational Behavior and Human Performance, 32, 370-398. Balzer, W.K., Doherty, M.E., and O'Connor, R., Jr., 1989. Effects of Cognitive Feedback on Performance. Psychological Bulletin, 106, 3, 410-433. Bandura, A., 1982. Self-Efficacy Mechanism in Human Agency. American Psychologist, 37, 122-147. Bandura, A., 1986. Social Foundations of Thought and Action, A Social Cognitive Theory. Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, Prentice Hall. Bangert Drowns, R.L., Kulik, J.A., and Kulik, C.C., 1991. Effects of Frequent Classroom Testing. Journal of Educational Research, 85, 2, 89-99. Bangert Drowns, R.L., Kulik, C.L., Kulik, J.A., and Morgan, M.T., 1991. The Instructional Effect of Feedback in Test-like Events. Review of Educational Research, 61, 213-237. Barg, J.A., Gallwitzer, P.M., Leachai, A., Barndala, K., and Trotzchell, R., 2001. The Automated Will, Non-Conscious Activation and Pursuit of Behavioral Goals. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 81, 6, 1014-1027. Bennett, N., and Kell, J., 1989. A Good Start. 4-year-olds in infant schools. Oxford, UK, Blackwell. Berglass, S., and Jones, E., 1978. Drug Choice as a Self-Handicapping Strategy in Response to Non-Contingent Success. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 36, 405-417. Black, P., and William, D., 1998. Assessment and Classroom Learning. Assessment in Education, 5, 1, 7-75. Blote, A.W., 1995. Students' Self-Concept in Relation to Perceived Differential Teacher Treatment. Learning and Instruction, 5, 3, 221-236. Bond, L., Smith, R., Baker, W.K., and Hattie, J.A., 2000, Certification System of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, A Construct and Consequential Validity Study. Washington, D.C., National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Brackbill, Y., Blobit, W.E., Dablin, D., and Wagner, J.E., 1963. Amplitude of Response and the Delay Retention Effect. Journal of Experimental Psychology, 66, 1, 57-64. Brayaquel, G.M., 1983. Formulations and Searchers. In G.M. Brayaquel, ed., Threatened Identities, pages 3-26. Chichester, UK, Wiley. Brockner, J. 1979. The Effects of Self-Esteem, Success Failure, and Self-Consciousness on Task Performance. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 37, 1732-1741. Brockner, J., Dare, W.R., and Lang, W.N., 1987. Self-Esteem and Reactions to Negative Feedback, Towards Greater Generalizability. Journal of Research in Personality, 21, 318-334. Brophy, J., 1981. Teacher Praise, of Functional Analysis. Review of Educational Research, 51, 5-32. Brunet, S., Huguet, P., and Monteil, J. M., 2000. Performance Feedback and Self-Focused Attention in the Classroom, When Past and Present Interact. Social Psychology of Education, 3, 277-293. Burnett, P.C., 2002. Teacher Praise and Feedback and Students' Perceptions of the Classroom Environment. Educational Psychology, 22, 1, 1-16. 105 Hattie and Timperley Butler, D.L., and Wynne, Ph., 1995. Feedback and Self-Regulated Learning, A Theoretical Synthesis. Review of Educational Research, 65, 3, 245-274. Butler, R., 1987. Task-Involving and Ego-Involving Properties of Evaluation, Effects of Different Feedback Conditions on Motivational Perceptions, Interest, and Performance. Journal of Educational Psychology, 79, 474-482. Butler, R., 1988. Enhancing and Undermining Intrinsic Motivation, The Effects of Task-Involving and Ego-Involving Evaluation on Interest and Performance. British Journal of Educational Psychology, 58, 1-14. Campbell, J.D., 1986. Similarity and Uniqueness, The Effects of Attribute Type, Relevance, and Individual Differences in Self-Esteem and Depression. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 50, 281-294. Campbell, J.D., and Ferry, P.J., 1985. Effects of Self-Esteem, Hypothetical Explanations, and Verbalization of Expectancies on Future Performance. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 48, 1097-1111. Card L. M., and Corno, L., 1981. Effects on Second Language Learning of Variations in Written Feedback on Homework Assignments. TESOL Quarterly, 15, 3, 251-261. Carroll, A., Durkin, K., Hattie, J., and Houghton, S., 1997. Goal Setting Among Adolescents, A Comparison of Delinquent, At-Risk, and Not At-Risk Youth. Journal of Educational Psychology, 89, 441-450. Carroll, A., Houghton, S., Durkin, K., and Hattie, J., 2001. Reputation Enhancing Goals, Integrating Reputation Enhancement and Goal Setting Theory as an Explanation of Delinquent Involvement. In F. Columbus, ed., Advances in Psychology Research, Volume 4, pages 101-129. New York, Nova Science. Carver, C.S., and Shire, M.F., 1981. Attention and Self-Regulation, A Control Theory to Human Behavior. New York, Springer Verlag. Carver, C.S., and Shire, M.F., 1982. Control Theory, A Useful Conceptual Framework for Personality Social, Clinical, and Health Psychology. Psychological Bulletin, 92, 111-135. Carver, C.S., and Shire, M.F., 1990. Origins and function of positive and negative affect, a control process view. Psychological review, 97, 19-35. Klariana, R.B., Wagner, D., and Roher Murphy, L.C., 2000. Applying a connectionist description of feedback timing. Educational Technology Research and Development, 48, 3, 5-21. Clark, S., Timperley, H., and Hattie, J.A., 2003. Assessing Formative Assessment. Auckland, New Zealand, Hodder Moa Beckett. Craven, R.G., 1997. Enhancing Academic Self-Concept, a large-scale longitudinal study in an educational setting. Dissertation Abstracts International, A. Humanities and Social Sciences, 58, 5A, 1577. Craven, R.G., Marsh, H.W., and Debus, R.L., 1991. Effects of Internally Focused Feedback and Attributional Feedback on Enhancement of Academic Self-Concept. Journal of Educational Psychology, 83, 17-27. Crocker, J., and Wolf, C.T., 2001. Contingencies of Self-Worth. Psychological Review, 108, 3, 593-623. Crooks, T.J., 1988. The Impact of Classroom Evaluation on Students. Review of Educational Research, 5, 438-481. Deci, E. L., Kostner, R., and Ryan, M. R., 1999. A meta-analytic review of experiments examining the effects of extrinsic rewards on intrinsic motivation. Psychological Bulletin, 125, 627-668. Deci, E. L., and Ryan, R., 1985. Intrinsic Motivation and Self-Determination in Human Behavior. New York, Plenum. 106 The Power of Feedback DeLuke, M.F., and Sommer, S.M., 2000. The Impact of Culture on Feedback-Seeking Behavior, an Integrated Model and Propositions. Academy of Management Review, 25, 4, 829-849. Deal, E. and Sturman, J.D., 1995. Effects of Feedback Complexity on Dynamic Decision-Making. Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, 62, 198-215. Dorn, E. and Bryan, T., 1994. Attribution Instruction. Teaching Exceptional Children, 26, 4, 61-63. Doyle, W., 1983. Academic Work. Review of Educational Research, 53, 159-199. Dweck, C. S., Davidson, W., Nelson, S., and Enna, B., 1978. Sex Differences in Learned Helplessness, 2. The Contingencies of Evaluative Feedback in the Classroom, and 3. An Experimental Analysis. Developmental Psychology, 14, 3, 268-276. Early, P.C., 1988. Computer-Generated Performance Feedback in the Magazine Subscription Industry. Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, 41, 50-64. Early, P.C., and Canfor, R., 1985. The Influence of Component Participation and Role Models on Goal Acceptance, Goal Satisfaction, and Performance. Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, 36, 3, 378-390. Early, P.C., Northcraft, G.B., Lee, C., and Liducci, T.R., 1990. Impact of Process and Outcome Feedback on the Relation of Goal Setting to Task Performance. Academy of Management Journal, 33, 1, 87-105. Elawar, M.C., and Corno, L., 1985. A factorial experiment in teachers' written feedback on student homework, changing teacher behavior a little rather than a lot. Journal of Educational Psychology, 77, 162-173. Elwell, W.C., and Tiberio, J., 1994. Teacher Praise, What Students Want. Journal of Instructional Psychology, 21, 4, 322-328. Erez, M., 1977. Feedback, a necessary condition for the goal-setting performance relationship. Journal of Applied Psychology, 62, 624-627. Frost, P.J., and Mahoney, T.A., 1976. Goal Setting and the Task Process, an Interactive Influence on Individual Performance. Organizational Behavior and Human Performance, 16, 250-279. Getze, R.L., Langer, P., and Glass, G.V., 1985. Meta-analysis of the effects of type and combination of feedback on children's discrimination learning. Review of Educational Research, 55, 1, 9-22. Goethals, G.R., 1986. Fabricating and Ignoring Social Reality, Selfing Estimates of Consensus. In J. M. Olson, C. P. Herman, and M. P. Zana, eds, Relative Deprivation and Social Comparison, The Ontario Symposium, Volume 4, pages 135-157. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Goethals, G.R., Messick, D.M., and Allison, S.T., 1991. The Uniqueness Bias, Studies of Constructive Social Comparison. In J. Sulls and T. A. Wills, eds, Social Comparison Research, Contemporary Theory and Research, pages 149-176. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Greenwald, A.G., 1980. The Totalitarian Ego, Fabrication and Revision of Personal History. American Psychologist, 35, 603-618. Harakiwas, J.M., 1979. The Effects of Reward Contingency and Performance Feedback on Intrinsic Motivation. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 37, 8, 1352-1363. Harakiwas, J.M., Mabderlink, G., and Sansone, C., 1984. Rewarding Pinball Wizardry, Effects of Evaluation and Q-Value on Intrinsic Interest. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 47, 287-300. 107 Hattie and Timperley, Hattie, J., and Yeager, R., 1998. Assessment and Classroom Learning, A Deductive Approach. Assessment in Education, 5, 111-122. Hattie, J. A., 1992. Self-Concept. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Hattie, J. A., 1999, June. Influences on Student Learning, Inaugural Professorial Address, University of Auckland, New Zealand. Retrieved from http://www.arts.auckland.acnz/staff/index.cfm, p equals 8650. Hattie, J. A., Biggs, J., and Purdy, N., 1996. Effects of Learning Skills Intervention on Student Learning, a Meta-Analysis. Review of Research in Education, 66, 99-136. Hattie, J. A., and Marsh, H. W., 1995. Future Research in Self-Concept. In B. Bracken, ed., Handbook on Self-Concept, pages 421-463. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Hollenbeck, J.R., Klein, H.J., O'Leary, A.M., and Wright, P.M., 1989. Investigation of the construct validity of a self-report measure of goal commitment. Journal of Applied Psychology, 74, 951-956. Howie, E. S.Y., S., Ford, L., and Vicente, K.J., 2000. Human-computer interface design can reduce misperceptions of feedback. System Dynamics Review, 16, 3, 151-171. Janoff Bowman, R., and Brickman, P., 1982. Expectations and What People Learn from Failure. In N.T. Feather, ed., Expectations and Actions, pages 207-237. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Karabenik, S.A., and Knapp, J.R., 1991. Relationship of academic help-seeking to the use of learning strategies and other instrumental achievement behavior in college students. Journal of Educational Psychology, 83, 221-230. Kernes, M.H., Brockner, J., and Frankel, B.S., 1989. Self-Esteem and Reactions to Failure, The Mediating Role of Overgeneralization. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 57, 707-714. Kinch, J.W., 1963. A Formalized Theory of the Self-Image. American Journal of Sociology, 68, 481-486. Kinch, J.W., 1968. Experiments on Factors Related to Self-Concept Change. Journal of Social Psychology, 74, 251-258. Klein, W.M., 2001. Post hoc Construction of Self-Performance and Other Performance in Selfing Social Comparison. Society for Personality and Social Psychology, 27, 6, 744-754. Kluger, A.N., and Denisai, A., 1996. The Effects of Feedback Interventions on Performance, a Historical Review, a Meta-Analysis, and a Preliminary Feedback Intervention Theory. Psychological Bulletin, 119, 254-284. Kluger, A.N., and Denisai, A., 1998. Feedback Interventions, Towards the Understanding of a Double-Edged Sword. Current Directions in Psychological Science, 7, 67-72. Kulavi, R.W., 1977. Feedback in Written Instruction. Review of Educational Research, 47, 1, 211-232. Kulavi, R.W., and Stock, W.A., 1989. Feedback in Written Instruction, The Place of Response Certitude. Educational Psychology Review, 1, 4, 279-308. Kulavi, R.W., White, M.T., Top, B.W., Chan, A.L., and Adams, J., 1985. Feedback Complexity and Corrective Efficiency. Contemporary Educational Psychology, 10, 285-291. Kulik, J.A., and Kulik, C.C., 1988. Timing of Feedback and Verbal Learning. Review of Educational Research, 58, 1, 79-97. Muhammad Yo, R., Menges, R.J., and Brinko, K.T., 1990, Methodological Explanations for the Modest Effects of Feedback from Student Ratings. Journal of Educational Psychology, 82, 232-241. 108 The Power of Feedback Latham, G.P., and Lee, T.W., 1986. Goal Setting. In E. A. Locke, ed., Generalizing from Laboratory to Field Settings, pages 101 to 117. Lexington, Ma., Lexington Books. Lee, T.W., Locke, E.A., and Latham, G.P., 1989. Goal Setting Theory and Job Performance. In L. A. Pervin, ed., Goal Concepts in Personality and Social Psychology, pages 291 to 321. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Erlbaum. Locke, E.A., and Latham, G.P., 1984. Goal Setting, a Motivational Technique That Works. Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, Prentice Hall. Locke, E.A., and Latham, G.P., 1990. A Theory of Goal Setting and Task Performance. Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, Prentice Hall. Lysakowski, R.S., and Wahlberg, H.J., 1982. Instructional Effects of Cues, Participation, and Corrective Feedback, a Quantitative Synthesis. American Educational Research Journal, 19, 559 to 578. Marcus, H., 1977. Self-Schemata and Processing Information About the Self. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 35, 63 to 78. Marsh, H. W., 1987. The Big Fish Little Pond Effect on Academic Self-Concept. Journal of Educational Psychology, 79, 280 to 295. Marsh, H. W., 1990. The Influence of Internal and External Frames of Reference on the Formation of Math and English Self-Concepts. Journal of Educational Psychology, 82, 107 to 116. Martin, F., Dal Alba, G., and Beatty, E., 1993. Conceptions of Learning. International Journal of Educational Research, 19, 3, 277 to 300. McLaughlin, T.F., 1974. Effects of Written Feedback in Reading on Behaviorally Disordered Students. Journal of Educational Research, 85, 5, 312 to 316. Meyer, W., 1982. Indirect Communication About Perceived Ability Estimates. Journal of Educational Psychology, 74, 888 to 897. Meyer, W., Bachman, U., Hempelmann, M., Plager, F., and Spiller, H., 1979. The Informational Value of Evaluation Behavior, Influences of Praise and Blame in Perceptions of Ability. Journal of Educational Psychology, 71, 259 to 268. Mikulincer, M., 1988. Reactance and Helplessness Following Exposure to Unsolvable Problems, The Effects of Attributional Style. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 54, 679 to 686. Moyne, A.K., 1986. Relative Effectiveness of Various Techniques of Calculus Instruction, a Meta-Analysis. Unpublished Doctoral Dissertation, Department of Mathematics, University of Syracuse, Syracuse, New York. Moreland, R.L., and Sweeney, P.D., 1984. Self-Expectancies and Reactions to Evaluations of Personal Performance. Journal of Personality, 52, 156 to 176. Mueller, C.M., and Dweck, C.S., 1998. Praise for Intelligence Can Undermine Children's Motivation and Performance. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 75, 1, 33 to 52. Nadler, D., 1979. The Effects of Feedback on Task Group Behavior, a Review of the Experimental Research. Organizational Behavior and Human Performance, 23, 309 to 338. Nelson L. E. Gall, S., 1981. Help-seeking, an understudied problem-solving skill in children. Developmental Review, 1, 224-226. Nelson L. E. Gall, S., 1985. Help-seeking behavior in learning. American Educational Research Association, 12, 55-90. Newman, R.S., and Schwager, M.T., 1993. Students' perceptions of the teacher and classmates in relation to reported help-seeking in math class. Elementary School Journal, 94, 3-17. 109 Hattie and Timperley Oken, M.A., and Sasfi, J.H., 1977. Adolescence, the Self-Concept, and Formal Operations. Adolescence, 12, 373-379. Page, E.B., 1958. Teacher Comments and Student Performance, a 74 Classroom Experiment in School Motivation. Journal of Educational Psychology, 49, 173-181. Payach, M., and Sturman, J.D., 1993. Boom, Bust, and Failures to Learn in Experimental Markets. Management Science, 39, 1439-1458. Harris, S.G., and Cunningham, A.E., 1996. Children Becoming Students. In D.C. Berliner and R.C. Calfee, eds., Handbook of Educational Psychology, pages 117-147. New York, Macmillan. Harris, S.G., and Winograd, P., 1990. Promoting Metacognition and Motivation of Exceptional Children. Rays, Remedial and Special Education, 11, 6, 7-15. Podsakov, P.M., and Farha, J.L., 1989. Effects of Feedback Sign and Credibility on Goal Setting and Task Performance. Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, 44, 45-67. Purdy, N., Hattie, J.A., and Douglas, G., 1996. Student Conceptions of Learning and Their Use of Self-Regulated Learning Strategies, a Cross-Cultural Comparison. Journal of Educational Psychology, 88, 87-100. Rummel, A., and Feinberg, R., 1988. Cognitive Evaluation Theory, a Meta-Analytic Review of the Literature. Social Behavior and Personality, 16, 147-164. Ryan, A.M., and Pintrich, P.R., 1977. Should I Ask for Help? The Role of Motivation and Attitudes in Adolescence Help-Seeking in Math Class. Journal of Educational Psychology, 89, 329-341. Sadler, R., 1989. Formative Assessment and the Design of Instructional Systems. Instructional Science, 18, 119-144. SLJ, R., 1979. Learning in the Learner's Perspective I. Some Common Sense Conceptions, Report Number 76. Gothenburg, Sweden, University of Gothenburg, Department of Education. Schroth, M.L., and Lund, E., 1993. Role of Delay of Feedback on Subsequent Pattern Recognition Transfer Tasks. Contemporary Educational Psychology, 18, 15-22. Schunk, D.H., and Rice, J.M., 1991. Learning Goals and Progress Feedback During Reading Comprehension Instruction. Journal of Reading Behavior, 23, 351-364. Sharp, P., 1985. Behavior Modification in the Secondary School, a Survey of Students' Attitudes to Rewards and Praise. Behavioral Approaches with Children, 9, 109 to 112. Shepard, L.A., Flexer, R.J., Hybert, E.J., Marion, S.F., Mayfield, V., and Weston, T.J., 1996. Effects of introducing classroom performance assessments on student learning. Educational measurement issues and practice, 15, 7-18. Schrager, J.S., and Sorman, P., 1977. Self-evaluations, initial success and failure, and improvement as determinants of persistence. Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology, 45, 784-795. Simmons, M., and Cope, P., 1993. Angle and Rotation, Effects of Feedback on the Quality of Learning. Educational Studies in Mathematics, 21, 375-382. Skiba, R., Casey, A., and Center, B.A., 1985-1986. Non-aversive Procedures in the Treatment of Classroom Behavior Problems. Journal of Special Education, 19, 459-481. Smith, T., Snyder, C., and Handelsman, M., 1982. On the Selfing Function of an Academic Wooden Leg, Test Anxiety as a Self-Handicapping Strategy. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 42, 314-321. Steinberg, L., 1996. Beyond the Classroom, Why School Reform Has Failed and What Parents Need to Do. New York, Touchstone. 110 The Power of Feedback. Sturman, J.D., 1989. Misperceptions of Feedback in Dynamic Decision Making. Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, 43, 301-335. Sturges, P.T., 1972. Information Delay and Retention, Effect of Information in Feedback and Tests. Journal of Educational Psychology, 63, 1, 32-43. Sturges, P.T., 1978. Delay of Informative Feedback in Computer-Assisted Testing. Journal of Educational Psychology, 70, 378-387. Souls, J. and Wang, C.K., 1987. In Search of the False Uniqueness Phenomenon, Fear and Estimates of Social Consensus. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 59, 229-241. Swan, W.B., 1985. The Self as Architect of Social Reality. In B. Schlenker, ed., The Self and Social Life, pages 100-125. New York, McGraw-Hill. Swan, W.B., and Hill, C.A., 1982. When Our Identities Are Mistaken, Reaffirming Self-Conceptions Through Social Interaction. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 43, 59-66. Swan, W.B., Pelham, B.W., and Chidester, T., 1988. Change Through Paradox, Using Self-Verification to Alter Beliefs. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, 54, 268-273. Sweller, J., 1990. Cognitive Processes and Instruction Procedures. Australian Journal of Education, 34, 125-130. Swindell, L.K., and Walls, W.F., 1993. Response Confidence and the Delay Retention Effect. Contemporary Educational Psychology, 18, 363-375. Tenenbaum, G., and Goldring, E., 1989. A meta-analysis of the effect of enhanced instruction, cues, participation, reinforcement, and feedback and correctives on motor skill learning. Journal of Research and Development in Education, 22, 53-64. Tesser, A., and Campbell, J., 1983. Self-Definition and Self-Evaluation Maintenance. In J. Sulls and A. Greenwald, eds, Social Psychological Perspectives on the Self, Volume 2, pages 1-31. Hillsdale, New Jersey, Lawrence Earlbaum. Thompson, T., 1997. Do we need to train teachers how to administer praise? Self-worth theory says we do. Learning and Instruction, 28, 49-64. Thompson, T., 1998. Metamemory Accuracy, Effects of Feedback and the Stability of Individual Differences. American Journal of Psychology, 111, 1, 33-42. Thompson, T., 1999. Underachieving to Protect Self-Worth, Theory Research and Interventions. Avebury, UK, Aldershot. Thompson, T., and Richardson, A., 2001. Self-handicapping status, claimed self-handicaps, and reduced practice effort following success and failure feedback. British Journal of Educational Psychology, 71, 151-170. Timperley, H., and Parr, J., 2005. Literacy Professional Development Project. Wellington, New Zealand Ministry of Education. Timperley, H.S., and Wiseman, J., 2002. The Sustainability of Professional Development in Literacy. Wellington, New Zealand Ministry of Education. Trope, Y., 1975. Seeking information about one's own ability as a determinant of choice among tasks. Journal of Personality and Psychology, 32, 1004-1013. Trope, Y., 1980. Self-Assessment, Self-Enhancement, and Task Performance. Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, 16, 116-129. Van Dijk, D., and Kluger, A.N., 2000, April. Positive, negative, feedback, encouragement or discouragement. Retrieved September 2001 from http://www.hug.ac.il/unw/main.html. Van Dijk, D., and Kluger, A.N., 2001. Goal Orientation versus Self-Regulation, Different Labels or Different Constructs. Paper presented at the 16th Annual Convention of the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, San Diego, CA 111. Hattie and Timperley Wahlberg, H.J., 1982. What Makes Schooling Effective? Contemporary Education Review, 1, 1-34. Watkins, D., and Regmi, M., 1992. How Universal Are Student Conceptions of Learning? A Nepalese Investigation. Psychologia, 35, 101-110. Watkins, D., Regmi, M., and Astilla, E., 1991. The Asian Learner as a Rote Learner Stereotype, Myth or Reality? Educational Psychology, 11, 21-34. Wiener, B., ed. 1974a, Achievement Motivation and Attribution Theory. Morristown, New Jersey, General Learning Press. Wiener, B., 1974b. An Attributional Interpretation of Expectancy Value Theory. In B. Wiener, ed., Cognitive Views of Human Motivation, pages 51-70. New York, Academic Press. Wiener, B., 1977. An Attributional Model for Educational Psychology. In L. Schulman, ed., Review of Research in Education, Vol. 4, pages 179-209. Itasca, I.L., Peacock. White, K.J., and Jones, K., 2000. Effects of Teacher Feedback on the Reputations and Peer Perceptions of Children with Behavior Problems. Journal of Experimental Child Psychology, 76, 302-326. Wilkinson, S.S., 1981. The Relationship of Teacher Praise and Student Achievement, a Meta-Analysis of Selected Research. Dissertation Abstracts International, 41, 9a, 3998. Wynne, P.H., and Butler, D.L., 1994. Student Cognition in Learning from Teaching. In T. Husson and T. Postlethwaite, eds, International Encyclopedia of Education, 2nd ed., pages 5738 to 5745. Oxford, UK, Pergamon. Wood, R.E., and Bandura, A., 1987. Impact of Conceptions of Ability on Self-Regulatory Mechanisms and Complex Decision-Making, Working Paper Series, 87-019. Sydney, University of New South Wales, Australian Graduate School of Management. Uni, R.H., and Miller, P.A., 1983. Effects of Diagnostic/Remedial Instruction on Science Learning, a Meta-Analysis. Journal of Research in Science Teaching, 20, 19-26. Zimmerman, B.J., 2000. Attaining Self-Regulation, A Social Cognitive Perspective. In Embo Ekerts and P.R. Pintrich, eds, Handbook of Self-Regulation, pages 13-39. San Diego, C.A., Academic Press. Authors John Hattie is a professor of education at the University of Auckland, Private Bag 92019, Faculty of Education, Auckland, New Zealand 1142, email, j.hattie@auckland.ac.nz. His interests are assessment, models of teaching and learning, and statistics. He and Helen Timperley co-authored with Shirley Clark, Unlocking Formative Assessment, Hatermoa, Auckland, NZ, 2003. Helen Timperley is a professor of education at the University of Auckland, Private Bag 92019, Faculty of Education, Auckland, New Zealand 1142, email, h.timperley@auckland.ac.nz. Her research investigates how to promote learning at all levels of the education system. She and John Hattie co-authored with Shirley Clark, Unlocking Formative Assessment, Hatermoa, Auckland, NZ, 2003. 112.